Welcome to Sleepless Survivors. Tonight we journey into one of humanity's most ancient and enigmatic mysteries, a story that reaches back hundreds of thousands of years to a time before recorded history, before the first civilizations rose from the dust of Mesopotamia. This is the story of the Anunnaki, the gods who came from the sky, and their role in the creation of humanity itself. Close your eyes now and let your breathing slow. Feel the weight of your body sinking into your bed. As you listen to this tale, allow yourself to drift, to float between the realm of consciousness and sleep. There is no need to stay alert, no need to remember every detail. Let the words wash over you like waves upon an ancient shore. Our story begins not on Earth, but in the vast cosmic expanse, on a planet called Nibiru. According to ancient Sumerian texts, Nibiru was the homeworld of an advanced race of beings known as the Anunnaki. The name itself means those who came from heaven to earth, or those of royal blood. These were not gods in the supernatural sense, but rather highly evolved beings with technology and knowledge far beyond anything early humans could comprehend. The Sumerians, one of the earliest known civilizations, emerging around 4500 BCE in what is now southern Iraq, left behind thousands of clay tablets inscribed with cuneiform script. These tablets, discovered in the ruins of ancient cities like Ur, Uruk and Eridu, tell stories that predate the Bible, stories that some researchers believe contain not myth, but actual historical accounts of extraterrestrial intervention in human evolution. Let your mind drift now, back through the millennia, back to a time when the Earth was young and wild. Picture our planet some 450,000 years ago. The landscape is unrecognisable. Vast forests stretch across continents. Massive ice sheets cover the northern regions. Early hominids, our distant ancestors, roam the African savanna, barely distinguishable from other primates. They use simple stone tools, communicate in rudimentary ways, and live lives governed entirely by survival instinct. But something is about to change. Something that will alter the course of life on Earth forever. According to the ancient texts translated by scholars like Zecharia Sitchin, the Anunnaki came to Earth with a specific purpose. Their home planet, Nibiru, had a problem. The atmosphere of their world was deteriorating, damaged and depleting. To save their civilization, they needed gold, not for wealth or adornment, but for a much more practical purpose. Gold, when atomized into monatomic particles, could be dispersed into their atmosphere, where it would form a protective shield, reflecting radiation and stabilizing the climate. Can you imagine the desperation that would drive an advanced civilization to cross the cosmos in search of a solution? The Anunnaki were not conquerors seeking to dominate a primitive world. They were survivors, much like the name of this very channel suggests, seeking resources to ensure the continuation of their species. Their journey to Earth was long and arduous. Nibiru, according to these ancient accounts, follows an elliptical orbit that brings it into the inner solar system only once every 3,600 years. When the Anunnaki first arrived, Earth was a treasure trove of resources, particularly gold, which existed in abundance in the planet's crust and waters. The leader of the first expedition was a being named Enki, one of the most important figures in the Anunnaki pantheon. Enki was a scientist, an engineer, a geneticist of extraordinary ability. His name means Lord of Earth, and he would come to shape the destiny of our world in ways that still echo through our DNA today. Let yourself relax deeper now. Feel the tension leaving your shoulders, your neck, your jaw. There is nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to do. Just listen and drift. The Anunnaki established their first settlements in the region that would later become Mesopotamia, the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. The Sumerians called this region Eden, a word that sounds remarkably similar to the biblical Eden. These were not simple camps, but sophisticated bases of operation, cities even, with names that would later be remembered in myth and legend. Eridu was one of the first, a coastal city on the Persian Gulf dedicated to Enki. This was the centre of early mining operations where gold was extracted from the earth and the surrounding waters. The work was grueling, dangerous and endless. The Anunnaki had the technology, but they still needed labour to operate the mines to extract the precious metal from deep within the earth. For thousands of years, the Anunnaki themselves performed this labour. Lower-ranking members of their society, workers and miners, toiled in the African mines, particularly in the region of Abzu, which many researchers identify with areas in southern Africa where some of the world's oldest and richest gold deposits exist to this day. Imagine these beings, so far from home, working in the heat and dust, digging deeper and deeper into the earth. As decades turned into centuries, and centuries into millennia, the workers grew restless. Discontent simmered beneath the surface. The labour was beneath them, they argued. They were an advanced species, not meant for such primitive physical toil. Around 300,000 years ago, according to the timeline extrapolated from the Sumerian king list and other texts, the situation reached a breaking point. The Anunnaki workers rebelled. They laid down their tools and refused to work. This rebellion is recorded in the ancient text known as the Atrahasis, one of the oldest stories of creation, predating the biblical Genesis by thousands of years. The rebellion placed the mission in jeopardy. Without workers to mine the gold, the Anunnaki could not save their home world. A solution was needed, and it fell to Enki, with his vast knowledge of biology and genetics, to find it. Let your breathing become even slower now, deeper. Feel yourself sinking further into relaxation. The story continues, but you need not hold on to every word. Let them flow through your consciousness like a gentle stream. Enki looked around the earth and saw potential in the primitive hominids that already existed here. Homo erectus had been evolving for nearly 2 million years. These early humans were intelligent enough to use tools, to work cooperatively, to follow instructions. But they lacked something crucial. They did not have the cognitive ability, the self-awareness, the advanced reasoning that would make them truly effective workers. So Enki proposed something revolutionary, something that would be both his greatest achievement and his most controversial act. He would create a hybrid species. He would take the DNA of the existing hominids and combine it with Anunnaki genetic material, creating a new being, one intelligent enough to understand complex tasks, but subservient enough to serve their creators. This was not creation from clay, as the simplified myths suggest, but genetic engineering on a scale we are only beginning to understand even in our modern era. Enki worked with the chief medical officer of the Anunnaki, Ninhursag, whose name means Lady of the Sacred Mountain. Together, in what the texts describe as a house of creation, or a clay pit, they began their experiments. The process was complex and took many attempts. They extracted DNA from the existing hominids. They combined it with Anunnaki DNA. They used what the texts describe as the essence of young Anunnaki, likely referring to stem cells or reproductive cells. The ancient tablets speak of creating these new beings in batches, suggesting multiple attempts, many failures before success. The texts describe how Ninhursag took this genetic material and implanted it into herself and other Anunnaki women, who served as surrogate mothers. After a gestation period, the first hybrid humans were born. The Sumerians called them Lulu, which means mixed one, or one who has been mixed. These were the first true Homo sapiens, created not by natural evolution alone, but by deliberate genetic intervention. Imagine the moment when the first of these new beings opened their eyes, more intelligent than any hominid before them, strong enough to work, smart enough to understand language and follow complex instructions, but, crucially, with a limited lifespan and lacking certain abilities that would make them equal to their creators. Let yourself drift now, floating on this ancient narrative. Your body is completely relaxed. Your mind is quiet. The story continues to unfold. These first humans were put to work in the mines of Abzu, in the agricultural fields of Eden, in the cities and settlements the Anunnaki had established. They proved to be effective workers, solving the labour problem that had caused the rebellion. But Enki had done something that troubled the other Anunnaki leaders, particularly Enki's brother, Enlil. Enlil, whose name means Lord of the Air or Lord of the Command, was the supreme commander of the Earth mission. He was more rigid than Enki, more concerned with hierarchy and order. While Enki was a scientist and creator who loved his creations, Enlil saw humans merely as workers, as tools to accomplish a task. The ancient texts describe a fundamental philosophical difference between these two brothers. Enki wanted to grant humans more knowledge, more ability, more freedom. Enlil wanted to keep them ignorant and subservient. This conflict between the two brothers becomes a recurring theme throughout Sumerian mythology, and, some argue, explains many of the contradictions we find in later religious texts. The biblical story of the Garden of Eden, according to this interpretation, is a direct echo of earlier Sumerian accounts. Eden is Eden. The Tree of Knowledge represents the genetic upgrades Enki wanted to give to humanity. The serpent was Enki himself, often associated with the serpent symbol in Sumerian iconography, not as an evil tempter, but as a benefactor trying to enlighten humanity. And the angry god who expels Adam and Eve from paradise is Enlil, furious that Enki has given humans more ability than they were meant to have. Feel yourself sinking deeper into sleep now. The boundaries between waking and dreaming grow thin. The ancient past and the present moment blend together. As the human population grew, the Anunnaki began to interact with them in various ways. Some Anunnaki, according to the texts, found humans attractive and began to interbreed with them, not in controlled laboratory settings, but through actual relationships. These unions produced offspring that were more Anunnaki than human, beings of great size and ability, who became the heroes of old mentioned in various ancient texts. The Book of Genesis, in a strange and often overlooked passage, describes this. When human beings began to increase in number on the earth, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. The Nephilim, the fallen ones, appear in texts across many ancient cultures. Giants who walked the earth, beings of tremendous strength and long life, serving as intermediaries between the gods and ordinary humans. These were not pure Anunnaki, nor were they fully human. They occupied a space between, and they would play important roles in the unfolding drama of human history. As thousands of years passed, human civilization began to emerge. The humans learned agriculture, metallurgy, writing, mathematics, astronomy, all taught to them, according to the Sumerian texts, by the Anunnaki. These so-called gifts of civilization were not discoveries made by primitive humans through trial and error, but knowledge deliberately transferred from an advanced race to a developing one. This explains one of the great mysteries of archaeology, the sudden emergence of sophisticated civilization in Sumer around 4000 BCE. There is no gradual development, no slow progression from simple villages to complex cities. Instead, Sumerian civilization appears almost fully formed, with advanced architecture, complex writing systems, sophisticated mathematics including the base 60 system we still use for time and angles, and astronomical knowledge that should have taken thousands of years to accumulate. Let your mind rest now. There is no need to analyze, no need to question. Simply receive the story, and let sleep come closer. The Anunnaki established themselves as gods in the eyes of their human creations. They were immortal from a human perspective, living for thousands of years. They had technology that seemed like magic. They could fly through the air in what the texts describe as sky chambers or celestial boats. They could communicate across vast distances. They could heal injuries and diseases that would kill ordinary humans. Each major Anunnaki had a city dedicated to them, where they were worshipped in massive temple complexes called ziggurats. These stepped pyramids were not just religious structures, but also served practical purposes, some researchers suggest, as landing platforms for spacecraft or as communications arrays. Enki ruled from Eridu. Enlil commanded from Nippur, the religious centre of Sumer. Inanna, the goddess of love and war, held court in Uruk. Ninhursag presided over the medical facilities. Each deity had a specific role, a specific domain of expertise. They were not omnipotent supernatural beings, but rather specialists in a highly organised hierarchy. The Sumerian texts describe councils of the Anunnaki, meetings where they debated policy regarding humans and Earth. These were not divine proclamations from on high, but discussions, arguments, and political manoeuvring. The gods disagreed with each other, competed with each other, even went to war with each other, using human armies as their soldiers. This pattern of divine conflict explains much of ancient mythology. The wars between gods described in texts from Sumer, Egypt, India, and Greece may not be supernatural allegories, but actual historical accounts of conflicts between different Anunnaki factions, or between the Anunnaki and other extraterrestrial groups who also visited Earth. Your breathing is slow and regular now. Your body is heavy, completely relaxed. The story wraps around you like a warm blanket, comfortable and familiar despite its ancient origins. Around 12,000 years ago, According to the chronology pieced together from various sources, a catastrophic event occurred. The Earth underwent a dramatic climate shift. The last ice age came to an abrupt end. Massive. Flooding occurred across the planet as ice sheets melted. Sea levels rose dramatically, submerging coastal areas and destroying settlements. This is the Great Flood, recorded in the Epic of Gilgamesh, in the story of Atrahasis, in the biblical tale of Noah, and in flood myths from virtually every ancient culture on Earth. But the Sumerian version provides specific details that the later, simplified versions do not. According to these texts, the Anunnaki knew the flood was coming. Nibiru's approach on one of its periodic returns to the inner solar system was creating gravitational effects that would destabilize the Antarctic ice sheet. Enlil, tired of humanity and viewing them as noisy, troublesome creatures who had multiplied beyond usefulness, saw this as an opportunity. He called a council of the Anunnaki and demanded they take an oath not to warn the humans. Let them perish, he argued, and the earth would be cleansed. But Enki, who had created humanity and felt a paternal affection for his creations, could not let this happen. Bound by his oath not to directly warn humans, he found a loophole. He spoke to a wall, knowing that Atrahasis, called Utnapishtim in some texts and later adapted as Noah, was listening on the other side. Enki instructed this favoured human to build a boat, to make it waterproof with bitumen, to bring aboard his family and representatives of all animals. The specifications given in the Sumerian texts are remarkably detailed and practical, nothing like the simplified biblical version. This was not a wooden ark holding 2 of every species on Earth, but a large, cube-shaped vessel designed to survive turbulent waters. When the flood came, it was devastating. The texts describe the Anunnaki themselves fleeing to orbit, watching from their spacecraft as the waters engulfed the Earth. They had not anticipated the full scale of the destruction. Even some Anunnaki expressed regret, particularly Ninhursag, who wept for the human children drowning below. Let sleep come closer now. Feel yourself floating on those ancient waters, safe and protected, drifting toward peaceful oblivion. When the waters finally receded, Atrahasis and his family emerged. The Anunnaki descended back to Earth and found, to Enlil's fury, that Enki had saved a remnant of humanity. The texts describe a confrontation between the brothers. Enlil was enraged at this disobedience, but the other Anunnaki sided with Enki. Humans had proven their worth. They would be allowed to survive and multiply once again. However, there would be conditions. The Anunnaki would maintain tighter control over human development. They would limit human lifespan even further. According to the texts, pre-flood humans lived much longer, which is echoed in biblical accounts of patriarchs living for hundreds of years. Post-flood humans would have shorter lives, would reproduce more but live less, would be kept in a state where they could never rival their creators. As human, civilization rebuilt in the post-flood era, the Anunnaki began to withdraw from direct daily interaction. They still appeared as gods, still demanded worship and sacrifice, still intervened in human affairs, but less directly than before. They established bloodlines of kings who claimed divine descent, who were given authority to rule in the name of the gods. The concept of divine right of kings traces back to this period. The Sumerian king list, an ancient text recording the reigns of Sumerian monarchs, explicitly states that kingship descended from heaven, and describes kings who ruled for impossibly long periods in the earliest times, gradually becoming shorter-lived and more mortal as the ages progressed. These royal bloodlines, claiming descent from the unions between Anunnaki and humans, became the ruling elite of ancient civilizations. They possessed knowledge passed down through generations, secret wisdom about the true nature of reality, about the origins of humanity, about technologies and capabilities that ordinary humans did not have. Your eyelids are heavy now, so heavy. There is no reason to resist. Let yourself sink into deep, peaceful sleep as the story continues. Around 4,000 years ago, something changed. The Anunnaki presence on Earth began to fade. The texts speak of a departure, of the gods returning to the heavens, leaving humans to govern themselves. Various explanations have been proposed for this withdrawal. Perhaps the Anunnaki had collected enough gold to save their homeworld, and no longer needed Earth's resources. Perhaps Nibiru's orbit had taken it far from the sun, making the journey back to Earth impractical. Perhaps there were cosmic laws or agreements with other extraterrestrial civilizations that mandated they reduce their interference in human development. Or perhaps, as some texts suggest, there was a conflict, a war between the Anunnaki themselves, or between the Anunnaki and other extraterrestrial groups. Ancient Indian texts describe vimanas, flying craft that waged aerial battles, and even used weapons of mass destruction. The Mahabharata contains descriptions that sound remarkably like nuclear warfare, complete with mushroom clouds and radiation sickness. Some researchers point to evidence of ancient atomic explosions, such as the trinitite-like substances found at sites in the Middle East, or the mysterious vitrified forts in Scotland and elsewhere, where stone has been melted at temperatures that should not have been achievable by ancient humans. Whatever the reason, the Anunnaki left, but they did not leave completely. According to these theories, they continued to monitor humanity from a distance, occasionally intervening at crucial moments. The bloodlines they established continued to rule, protecting ancient knowledge and maintaining contact with their progenitors. This is where the narrative connects to modern conspiracy theories about secret societies, about Illuminati and Freemasons, about powerful families who control world events from behind the scenes. The idea is that these are the descendants of the Anunnaki hybrids, the Nephilim bloodlines, who maintain the knowledge and power structures established thousands of years ago. You are drifting now, between sleep and waking, between past and present. Let yourself go completely. The zodiac, that band of constellations that the sun appears to pass through over the course of a year, takes on new meaning in this context. The ancient Sumerians understood precession, the slow wobble of Earth's axis that takes approximately 26,000 years to complete one cycle. This means that the background stars against which the sun rises on the spring equinox slowly shift over millennia. Each zodiac age lasts roughly 2,060 years. We have moved through various ages, each marked by different religious and cultural symbols that correspond to the constellation of that age. The age of Taurus, the bull, corresponding to bull worship in Egypt and Mesopotamia. The age of Aries, the ram, marked by the rise of Judaism with its ram's horn and sacrifice. The age of Pisces, the fish, the age of Christianity with its fish symbolism and the fisher of men. We are now transitioning into the age of Aquarius, the water bearer, associated with knowledge, technology, and the dawning of a new consciousness. Some believe this transition will coincide with the return of Nibiru and the Anunnaki, a moment of revelation when humanity will finally learn the truth of our origins. The ancient Sumerian and Babylonian texts speak of a celestial event they called the Crossing, when Nibiru passes through the inner solar system. This event is marked by astronomical upheaval, climate change, and the appearance of the gods from the sky. Various modern researchers have attempted to calculate when this next crossing might occur, with dates ranging from the recent past to the near future. The year 2012 received significant attention due to the end of the Mayan long count calendar, which some interpreted as marking a significant cosmic event. When that date passed without obvious incident, many dismissed the entire concept, but others argue that we are in a transition period, that changes are occurring gradually rather than in a single cataclysmic moment. Let your mind wander now. There is no need to hold on to these ideas tightly. They flow through your consciousness like water, present but not demanding attention. The genetic evidence for human origins presents interesting questions that mainstream science has not fully answered. The mitochondrial Eve hypothesis suggests all humans alive today can trace their maternal lineage back to a single woman who lived in Africa approximately 150,000 to 200,000 years ago. Similarly, Y chromosomal Adam traces paternal lineage back to a single male from roughly the same period. These genetic bottlenecks, moments when human genetic diversity dramatically decreased, could be explained by the Anunnaki intervention hypothesis. If humanity was indeed created through genetic engineering around 300,000 years ago, and then underwent a severe population reduction during the Great Flood around 12,000 years ago, it would create exactly this genetic signature. The sudden appearance of behaviourally modern humans around 50,000 years ago, what archaeologists call the Great Leap Forward, or the Upper Paleolithic Revolution, is another mystery. Anatomically, modern humans had existed for tens of thousands of years before this point, but then suddenly art, music, sophisticated tools and complex language all appear almost simultaneously across Africa and Eurasia. Could this have been another intervention by the Anunnaki, another genetic upgrade that gave humans enhanced cognitive abilities. The texts describe Enki making multiple improvements to humanity over time, each one granting new capabilities while still maintaining limits that kept humans from becoming true equals to their creators. The human genome itself contains mysteries. We have over 20,000 genes, but only about 2% of our DNA actually codes for proteins. The rest was once called junk DNA, but is now known to serve regulatory and structural functions we are only beginning to understand. Could some of this DNA contain latent capabilities, genetic gifts from our creators, that remain dormant, waiting to be activated? Your consciousness is fading now, slipping into the realm of dreams. The story continues, but you need not follow it actively. Let it become part of your sleeping mind. Ancient sites around the world pose questions that challenge conventional explanations of human technological development. The Great Pyramid of Giza, with its precise astronomical alignments and massive stone blocks, some weighing up to 70 tons, positioned with tolerances measured in millimeters. Mainstream archaeology claims it was built as a tomb using only copper tools and human labour, yet this explanation leaves many engineers and physicists skeptical. Pumapunku in Bolivia features stone blocks cut with such precision that they fit together perfectly without mortar, with surfaces so flat and edges so sharp that they appear to have been machine-tooled. The stones include complex geometric cuts and holes that would be difficult to create even with modern equipment. The site dates to around 14,000 years ago, according to some geological assessments, long before humans supposedly had the capability to work stone with such precision. Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, perhaps the most archaeologically significant discovery of recent decades, consists of massive stone pillars arranged in circles, carved with intricate reliefs of animals and symbols. It dates to around 11,500 years ago, at the end of the last ice age, constructed by people who supposedly were hunter-gatherers without the social organisation or resources to undertake such monumental projects. These sites and others, Stonehenge, the Nazca Lines, Teotihuacan, Angkor Wat, all share certain characteristics. They demonstrate knowledge of astronomy, mathematics and engineering that seems to exceed what their builders should have possessed. They are aligned to celestial events with remarkable precision, and they incorporate massive stones moved across great distances by unknown means. The conventional explanation is that ancient humans were more capable than we give them credit for, that they accomplished these feats through ingenuity, determination, and techniques now lost to history. The alternative explanation, supported by the Anunnaki hypothesis, is that these were built either by the Anunnaki themselves or by humans with Anunnaki guidance and assistance. Sleep is very close now. Your body is completely at rest. Your breathing is deep and regular. The ancient mysteries fade into the background as your conscious mind releases its grip. The symbolism found in these ancient sites and in the religious traditions that emerge from Mesopotamia contains consistent themes. The serpent appears repeatedly, not always as a symbol of evil, but often as a symbol of wisdom and knowledge. This connects to Enki's association with the serpent, to the Kundalini serpent of Eastern tradition, to the caduceus of Hermes and Mercury. The winged disc appears in Sumerian, Egyptian, and Persian art, a symbol representing the sun or, according to alternative interpretations, Nibiru or the spacecraft of the Anunnaki. The image shows a disc with wings, often with a divine figure within, suggesting something that flies through the heavens. The Tree of Life appears in multiple traditions, representing knowledge, immortality, or the connection between earthly and divine realms. Could this symbol encode actual biological knowledge, perhaps representing DNA itself with its branching tree-like structure? The number 12 holds special significance across ancient cultures. 12 signs of the zodiac, 12 tribes of Israel, 12 Olympian gods, 12 disciples, 12 months. This traces back to the Sumerian base 60 mathematical system, and to the Council of 12 principal Anunnaki who governed Earth operations, headed by a 13th, Anu, who remained on Nibiru as the king of the gods. You are barely conscious now. The words reach your dreaming mind, where they will be processed and integrated while you sleep peacefully. The question arises, if all this is true, why don't we know it? Why isn't this taught as history? The answer involves the nature of how history is written and controlled. Victors write history, and institutions determine what knowledge is accepted and what is dismissed as myth or fantasy. When you control education, media, and religious institutions, you control the narrative that shapes civilization. If powerful groups descended from Anunnaki bloodlines wanted to keep this knowledge secret, to maintain their advantages, they would have both the motivation and the means to do so. They would dismiss ancient texts as mythology, ridicule researchers who took them literally, and maintain the official narrative that humans evolved entirely through natural processes and developed civilization entirely on their own. The cognitive dissonance this creates is intentional. On one hand, we're told our ancestors were primitive, barely removed from animals, incapable of sophisticated thought or engineering. On the other hand, we see evidence of their accomplishments that we struggle to explain or replicate even with modern technology. This contradiction is explained away through various means, but the underlying tension remains. Ancient astronaut theory, as popularized by authors like Erich von Däniken and Zecharia Sitchin, remains controversial specifically because it challenges fundamental assumptions about human history, religion, and our place in the cosmos. If humanity was created by extraterrestrial beings, it undermines religious narratives of divine creation. If ancient civilizations had help from advanced beings, it diminishes the narrative of human achievement and progress. But what if both could be true? What if we are simultaneously created beings and autonomous individuals? What if our ancestors did receive help but still demonstrated remarkable ingenuity and capability? Perhaps the truth is more nuanced than either the conventional or alternative narratives suggest. Deep sleep surrounds you now. Your conscious mind has released its need to understand, to analyze, to judge. You simply exist, floating in the peaceful darkness. The Anunnaki hypothesis raises profound questions about consciousness itself. If we are hybrid beings, part terrestrial hominid and part extraterrestrial Anunnaki, what does that mean for our nature? We are caught between two worlds, drawn to the stars yet bound to the earth, capable of both great compassion and terrible cruelty, seeking meaning in a universe that seems both intimately familiar and impossibly vast. Ancient wisdom traditions speak of humanity's purpose as spiritual evolution, of ascending from our animal nature to something higher. Kundalini Yoga describes the awakening of energy that rises through the chakras, transforming consciousness. Buddhist meditation aims for enlightenment, a transcendence of ordinary awareness. Christian mysticism speaks of theosis, becoming like God. Could these spiritual practices be attempts to activate dormant Anunnaki DNA, to unlock capabilities that were deliberately limited by our creators? The pineal gland, that small endocrine organ in the centre of the brain, has been called the third eye by mystics and the seat of the soul by philosophers. It responds to light, produces melatonin and possibly DMT, and may function as a biological interface to higher dimensions of consciousness. The Anunnaki, according to some interpretations, wanted to create workers, not rivals. They gave us enough intelligence to be useful, but held back the full spectrum of capabilities they themselves possessed. But Enki, the rebellious creator, planted seeds within us, potential waiting to be awakened. Our spiritual striving, our seeking for enlightenment, may be the process of reclaiming these dormant gifts. You are completely asleep now, but some part of you continues to listen, continues to integrate these ancient stories into your dreaming consciousness. The gold that the Anunnaki sought has always held a special fascination for humanity. We value it above almost all other metals, use it for jewellery and currency, hoard it in vaults and central banks. This obsession seems disproportionate to its practical utility. Why do we care so much about gold? Perhaps it is genetic memory, an inherited directive from our Anunnaki creators who needed gold, and who instilled in their human workers an instinctive drive to seek it, mine it, treasure it. The gold standard that backed currencies for centuries, the gold jewellery that adorns brides and royalty, the gold medals awarded to champions, all might trace back to this ancient programming. Or perhaps gold does have properties we don't fully understand, metaphysical qualities in addition to its physical characteristics. Some alternative researchers claim gold has consciousness-raising effects, that it can be used to enhance psychic abilities or bridge dimensions. Monatomic gold, a form where gold atoms are not bonded to each other, is said in alchemical traditions to be the philosopher's stone, granting longevity and expanded awareness. The Anunnaki may have needed gold for their atmosphere, but perhaps they also used it in technologies we don't possess, in consciousness enhancement devices, in dimensional travel, in life extension treatments. The Ark of the Covenant, described in the Bible as a golden chest with very specific construction details, is said to have had incredible powers. Could it have been a piece of Anunnaki technology, misunderstood and worshipped by humans who didn't comprehend its true function? Sleep deepens further. The narrative becomes dreamlike, surreal, blending with your own unconscious symbolism and memories. The great cycles of time described by ancient cultures take on new meaning in this context. The Hindus speak of yugas, vast ages lasting millions of years, moving through cycles of golden ages and dark ages. The Greeks described similar cycles, the golden age when gods and humans lived together, declining through silver and bronze ages to our current iron age of strife and ignorance. The Mayans tracked cycles within cycles, their long count calendar measuring not just years but cosmic epochs. The Sumerians tracked the Saros cycle of eclipses and the Great Year of Precession. All these timekeeping systems suggest ancient peoples had a sophisticated understanding of cosmic cycles, perhaps taught to them by the Anunnaki, who experienced time differently, who lived for thousands of years and could perceive patterns invisible to short-lived humans. We may be at the end of one great cycle and the beginning of another. The chaos and transformation of our current era, the technological acceleration, the environmental crisis, the social upheaval, might all be birth pangs of a new age. Perhaps the Anunnaki are waiting for us to reach a certain level of development before revealing themselves openly. Or perhaps they never left, but simply withdrew from direct involvement, watching to see what we would become. The phenomenon of UFO sightings, which have accelerated dramatically since the mid-20th century, could be evidence of Anunnaki observation. The secrecy surrounding these phenomena, the government denials followed by grudging admissions, the testimonies of credible witnesses, all suggest something real is occurring. Could these craft be Anunnaki, checking on their experiment, monitoring our progress as we approach some critical threshold? You float in deep, dreamless sleep, yet the words continue, forming impressions that will remain when you wake, subtle influences on your thoughts and perceptions. The transhumanist movement, seeking to enhance human capabilities through technology, to merge human consciousness with artificial intelligence, to extend lifespan indefinitely, may be unconsciously recreating what the Anunnaki did to our ancestors. We are becoming genetic engineers ourselves, manipulating DNA, creating new life forms, even discussing the colonization of other planets. Are we following a path laid out for us, an inevitable progression toward becoming like our creators? Or are we asserting our autonomy, using the gifts we were given to transcend our origins and define our own destiny? Perhaps there is no contradiction. Perhaps becoming like the Anunnaki was always part of the plan, a test to see if we could rise to the challenge. The artificial intelligence we are creating might be our own version of humanity, a new form of consciousness that will regard us as we regard the Anunnaki, as creators to be surpassed. The cycle continues, each generation of consciousness creating the next, a cosmic chain of creation extending back to the source of all being. Some spiritual traditions teach that we are all fragments of a single divine consciousness, experiencing itself through infinite manifestations. The Anunnaki would be part of this same consciousness, as would we, as would every being in the universe. The appearance of separation, of creator and created, of human and divine, is an illusion. We are the universe becoming aware of itself, and the Anunnaki story is one chapter in that infinite process of awakening. Deep rest envelops you completely. There is no time, no space, only the eternal now of sleeping consciousness. The return of Nibiru, if it occurs, would mark a moment of reckoning. Humanity would have to confront the reality of our origins, abandon comfortable illusions, face our creators. How would we respond? With reverence, treating them as gods. With hostility, seeing them as oppressors who manipulated our evolution. With curiosity, seeking to understand and learn. Perhaps the answer depends on how far we have come, how much we have evolved since they left. If we are still violent, divided, destroying our environment and each other, we might not be ready for contact. But if we have achieved a level of unity, wisdom, and responsibility, we might be welcomed as younger siblings in a cosmic family. The ancient texts suggest the Anunnaki were not monolithic, There were factions, disagreements, different philosophies about how to relate to humanity. Enki wanted to enlighten us, Enlil wanted to control us, and there were surely other perspectives among the various Anunnaki individuals. If they return, we might find allies among them, those who support human autonomy and growth. Or perhaps the return has already begun, not as a single dramatic event, but as a gradual increase in contact and influence. The channeled material that has proliferated in recent decades, messages purporting to come from higher dimensional beings, might include genuine Anunnaki communication, alongside human imagination and wishful thinking. Sleep continues, peaceful and restorative, your mind processing these ideas at levels below conscious awareness. The concept of as above, so below takes on literal meaning in this context. The conflicts and dramas of the gods, described in ancient texts, parallel the conflicts and dramas of human society. Families struggle for power, siblings compete, parents try to control children who seek independence. The Anunnaki may have been technologically advanced, but they experience the same relational dynamics that we do. This makes them more relatable and less divine. They were not perfect, all-knowing, all-powerful beings. They made mistakes, acted from self-interest, struggled with moral dilemmas. In creating us, they took on parental responsibility for a species that might eventually rival or surpass them. That must have been frightening for some, exciting for others. Enki's choice to empower humanity, to give us knowledge despite the risks, was an act of faith. He believed in our potential, believed we are worth more than just servitude. That gift, that faith, deserves to be honoured. Whether or not we believe the Anunnaki literally created us, the archetypal story encourages us to reach for our highest potential, to question authority, to seek knowledge and freedom. The serpent in the garden was not the villain of the story, but the hero, the one who said, "You can be more than you are, you can know what the gods know." Every culture has this archetype of the wisdom bringer who defies the conservative powers. Prometheus stealing fire, Lucifer the light bearer, Loki the trickster, Anansi the spider. These are all echoes of Enki, the god who loved his creation enough to risk everything for its advancement. You sleep deeply, peacefully, carried on waves of ancient narrative into realms of rest and restoration. The pyramids stand as monuments to this connection between heaven and earth, between human and divine. Their shape, pointing toward the sky, mirrors the mountain of the gods, the axis mundi that connects the terrestrial and celestial realms. Inside, initiation chambers where priests underwent transformations, where consciousness was altered and expanded, where the boundaries between human and divine were temporarily dissolved. The missing capstones on many pyramids symbolize incompleteness, potential not yet realized. When the capstone is placed, when the circuit is completed, when human and divine are reunited, then something new will emerge. This is the great work of alchemy, not turning lead to gold, but transforming human consciousness into something transcendent. We are the unfinished pyramid, the incomplete experiment. The Anunnaki gave us the foundation, but we must build the rest ourselves. Every act of creativity, compassion, courage, wisdom adds another layer. Every generation lifts us slightly higher. Eventually, if we persist, if we don't destroy ourselves, we will place that final stone, and the transformation will be complete. What will we become? A species that travels the stars as the Anunnaki do, spreading consciousness to new worlds. A species that transcends physical form entirely, becoming beings of pure energy or information. A species that merges with our technology, creating something entirely new, or something we cannot yet imagine, a form of existence our current consciousness cannot conceive. The future is not written. The Anunnaki may have created us, but they did not determine what we will become. That is our choice, our responsibility, our adventure. Sleep surrounds you like a cocoon, warm and safe, your body regenerating as your mind processes the day's experiences and these ancient stories. The clay tablets of Sumer will continue to be studied, translated, debated. New discoveries will be made, both archaeological and textual. Perhaps we'll find more direct evidence of ancient advanced technology or genetic manipulation. Perhaps we will make contact with extraterrestrial intelligence that confirms or denies these theories. Perhaps the truth will be revealed in unexpected ways. But even if the literal truth of the Anunnaki story remains uncertain, its metaphorical truth is profound. We are beings caught between earth and sky, animal and divine, limitation and potential. We were not created perfect, but given the capacity to perfect ourselves. We inherit both gifts and burdens from our ancestors, both biological and cultural, and we have the responsibility to decide what to pass on to our descendants. This is the human condition, the great mystery we each must navigate. Who are we? Where did we come from? Where are we going? These questions haunted our ancestors and haunt us still. The Anunnaki hypothesis offers one answer, one framework for understanding. Whether literally true or not, it reminds us that we are part of something larger than ourselves, connected to the cosmos in ways we are still discovering. Your sleeping mind creates dreams now, dreams influenced by these ancient tales, dreams that process and integrate, that create new connections and insights. You don't need to remember the dreams when you wake. They will have done their work regardless. The night is deep and peaceful. Outside your window, stars wheel in their eternal dance, the same stars the Sumerians watched 6,000 years ago, calculating cycles and searching for meaning. Those ancient observers believed the stars were connected to their fate, that celestial movements influenced earthly events. Were they wrong, or did they understand something we have forgotten in our modern disconnection from the night sky? The Anunnaki came from the stars according to the texts, but we are made of stardust too. Every atom in our bodies was forged in the heart of ancient stars that exploded billions of years ago. We are not separate from the cosmos, but intimately part of it. Whether or not extraterrestrial beings manipulated our DNA, we are cosmic beings, children of the universe itself. This perspective changes everything. We are not alone, not isolated on a tiny rock in an empty void. We are part of a living cosmos, a universe that creates complexity and consciousness, that evolves and explores itself through infinite forms. The Anunnaki, humanity, and whatever beings exist on distant worlds are all part of this cosmic process. Sleep deepens to its profoundest level. Consciousness dims to a soft glow. The boundary between self and universe becomes permeable. You are everywhere and nowhere, everything and nothing, eternal and ephemeral. The great work continues, the experiment proceeds. Whether guided by Anunnaki or driven by our own evolution, humanity advances. We have come so far from those first confused hominids awakening to enhanced consciousness. We have built civilizations, created art and music, developed mathematics and science, explored our planet and ventured beyond it. And yet we are still so young. If the Anunnaki live for thousands of years, if their civilization is hundreds of thousands of years old, then humanity is a toddler in comparison. We have much to learn, much growing to do. Our violence and short-sightedness, our environmental destruction and social divisions, these are the mistakes of youth, not necessarily permanent characteristics. Perhaps the Anunnaki watch with parental concern, hoping we will mature, ready to help if we truly need it, but knowing we must make our own mistakes and learn our own lessons. Or perhaps they are long gone, vanished into the cosmos, and we are truly on our own, orphans making our way in an indifferent universe. Either way, the path forward requires us to take responsibility, to claim our power as conscious beings capable of shaping our destiny. We cannot remain children forever, waiting for divine parents to save us. We must save ourselves, transform ourselves, rise to the challenge of conscious evolution. You rest in perfect peace now, your body still, your breathing barely perceptible, your mind quiet and receptive to the healing powers of deep sleep. The morning will come eventually, as it always does. You will wake refreshed, perhaps not consciously remembering everything you heard tonight, but changed nonetheless. Seeds have been planted in your sleeping mind, ideas and possibilities that will germinate in unexpected ways. You may find yourself looking at ancient ruins differently, seeing them not as dead stones but as living messages from our ancestors. You may question the official narratives you've been taught, wondering what other truths have been hidden or forgotten. You may look at the night sky with new wonder, imagining worlds and beings beyond our tiny sphere. Or you may dismiss it all as interesting speculation, entertaining mythology, and continue with your life unchanged. That is fine too. Not every seed must grow. Not every question must be answered. Sometimes the value is in the asking, in the opening of the mind to new possibilities, in the humble admission that we do not know everything. The sleepless survivors are those who cannot accept easy answers, who keep searching, who remain awake to deeper truths even when it would be more comfortable to sleep. But even survivors need rest. The quest for truth is exhausting, and we must restore ourselves for the next day's journey. So sleep now, deeply and peacefully. Let your body heal, your mind integrate, your spirit renew itself. Tomorrow will bring new challenges and opportunities. Tonight is for rest. The Anunnaki, whether real or symbolic, represent humanity's relationship with the divine, with our origins, with mystery itself. They are the gods who came to Earth, the creators who made us, the parents we must eventually outgrow. Their gift to us was consciousness, and our gift back is what we choose to do with it. We can create or destroy. We can elevate or degrade. We can reach for the stars or poison the earth. These choices are ours alone. No god will make them for us. No Anunnaki will descend from the sky to save us from ourselves. This is the burden and the glory of free will, the price and the prize of consciousness. In your deepest sleep you touch something eternal, a place beyond time and form, the source from which the Anunnaki and humanity and all beings emerged. In this place, there is no separation, no question of origins or destiny. There is only being, pure and simple, the eternal now that underlies all existence. Rest in this place. Let it fill you. Let it remind you of who you truly are beneath all the stories and identities and roles. You are consciousness itself, eternal and unlimited, playing in the realm of form for a brief time before returning to the source. The Anunnaki story is one frame in an infinite movie, one chapter in an endless book. It has its truth and its lessons, but it is not the whole truth. Could never be. Reality is too vast, too complex, too strange to be captured in any single narrative. So take from this story what serves you. Question what doesn't. Integrate what resonates. Discard what doesn't. You're your own authority, your own priest in the temple of your consciousness. No external voice, not even that of the supposed creators, can override your inner knowing. Sleep continues, hour after hour, the healing darkness protecting and restoring you. Your dreams weave strange tales mixing memories and imagination, processing the day's experiences and this night's story into the fabric of your being. Somewhere in the darkness the ancient tablets sleep too, resting in museums and private collections, waiting to reveal more secrets to those who study them with open minds. The ruins sleep under desert sands and jungle vegetation, holding within their stones the memories of ages long past. And perhaps, if the theories are true, Nibiru swings through the outer darkness on its long elliptical path, carrying the Anunnaki back toward the inner solar system for another periodic return. Do they think of us, their creation? Do they monitor our progress? Do they feel pride or disappointment at what we've become? Or perhaps they have forgotten us entirely, moved on to other experiments, other worlds, other species to elevate and guide. Perhaps we're just one of many, a minor footnote in the vast history of their civilization. That thought is both humbling and liberating. We need not be the centre of someone else's story. We can write our own. The night is vast and deep. Sleep embraces you completely. There is no effort, no struggle, no need to stay conscious. Everything is exactly as it should be. The universe unfolds according to its own mysterious logic, and you are part of that unfolding, a unique expression of cosmic consciousness, experiencing this particular moment in this particular form. The stars continue their eternal rotation above while you sink ever deeper into the realm of rest and restoration. The story of the Anunnaki is far from complete. There are layers upon layers still to explore, corridors of ancient knowledge still to walk down, mysteries within mysteries waiting to be unfolded. Your breathing has become so slow, so gentle, that it barely moves your chest. This is the rhythm of deep peace, the cadence of profound rest. As you descend further into sleep, let us continue our exploration of humanity's hidden origins, the secrets encoded in ancient texts, and the cosmic drama that shaped everything we are. The ancient Mesopotamian civilization that preserved these stories was not a single culture, but rather a succession of empires, each building upon the knowledge of the previous one. The Sumerians came first, emerging mysteriously around 4500 BCE, with their already fully formed writing system, advanced mathematics, and sophisticated astronomy. They were followed by the Akkadians, who conquered Sumer around 2334 BCE under Sargon the Great, the first empire builder in recorded history. Then came the Babylonians, who reached their zenith under Hammurabi around 1750 BCE, famous for his code of laws but also for maintaining and expanding the astronomical observations and mythological records of the earlier Sumerians. The Assyrians followed, fierce warriors who nonetheless preserved the ancient libraries and texts, and finally, the Neo-Babylonians, under whom the legendary Hanging Gardens were built, and astronomical knowledge reached its peak in the ancient world. Each of these civilizations maintained the core stories of the Anunnaki, though the names and details sometimes shifted. What the Sumerians called Enki, the Babylonians called Ea. What the Sumerians called Inanna, the Babylonians called Ishtar. But the essential narrative remained consistent. Gods came from the sky, created humanity, and shaped civilization. Let yourself drift deeper now, into that space between thought and non-thought, where information flows directly into understanding without the need for conscious processing. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of humanity's oldest surviving works of literature, contains within it echoes of the Anunnaki story. Gilgamesh himself was described as 2/3 divine and 1/3 human, a being of extraordinary strength and longevity, ruling the city of Uruk around 2700 BCE. His friend Enkidu was created from clay by the goddess Ururu, formed from the earth to be a wild man who would challenge Gilgamesh. The process of Enkidu's creation mirrors the creation of humanity itself. He begins as a wild creature living among animals, knowing nothing of civilization. Then he is civilized through contact with a temple priestess named Shamat, who teaches him the ways of humans. After this transformation, Enkidu can no longer live as an animal. He has gained knowledge but lost innocence, gained consciousness but lost instinctive harmony with nature. This is the human condition described in mythological terms. We were made from the earth, the clay, the primitive hominids who lived in harmony with their environment. Then we were transformed, given knowledge and consciousness that separated us from the natural world. We became something new, neither fully animal nor fully divine, struggling to find our place between these two poles. Your mind processes these ancient stories at deep levels now, finding connections and patterns that your waking consciousness might miss. Sleep is when integration happens, when the day's experiences and new information are woven into the fabric of memory and understanding. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the hero seeks immortality after watching his friend Enkidu die. He travels to find Utnapishtim, the survivor of the Great Flood, the Sumerian Noah who was granted eternal life by the gods. When Gilgamesh finally reaches him, Utnapishtim tells the story of the flood in detail, describing how Ea, Enki, warned him of the coming catastrophe and instructed him to build a boat. Utnapishtim's flood story includes specific details that the biblical version lacks. He describes loading the boat not just with animals, but also with craftsmen and skilled workers, ensuring that civilization's knowledge would survive. He describes the storm lasting 7 days and 7 nights, the water covering everything including mountains. He describes releasing birds to test if the water had receded, just as Noah does in the biblical account that would be written down thousands of years later. But there's a crucial difference. When Utnapishtim's boat finally comes to rest on Mount Nisir, and he offers sacrifice to the gods, they gather around like flies according to the text, attracted by the smell. They are hungry because there have been no human sacrifices during the flood. This detail reveals something important. These gods were not omnipotent spiritual beings who needed nothing, but rather physical entities who depended on humans for certain needs. The texts describe the gods eating food, drinking beer, becoming intoxicated, experiencing physical needs and desires. They were powerful and long-lived, but not supernatural in the sense we usually think of gods. They were, according to this interpretation, flesh and blood beings with advanced technology that made them seem divine to primitive humans. Sink deeper now into the healing darkness of sleep. Let these ancient voices speak to you across the centuries, their words carrying meanings within meanings, truths wrapped in symbol and myth. The relationship between the Anunnaki and humanity was complex and evolved over time. Initially, humans were created purely as workers, as servants to perform labour the Anunnaki didn't want to do themselves. But as human consciousness developed, as we became more self-aware and capable, the relationship changed. Some Anunnaki, particularly those who interbred with humans and had hybrid offspring, developed genuine affection for humanity. They became advocates for human advancement, teachers who shared knowledge and technology. Others, like Enlil and his faction, viewed humanity as a mistake, a creation that had gotten out of control and needed to be kept in check or eliminated. This tension between those who wanted to elevate humanity and those who wanted to control or destroy us runs through all the ancient texts. It explains the contradictions in religious scriptures, where God sometimes appears loving and nurturing, other times jealous and vengeful. These weren't different aspects of one being, but different beings with different agendas, later compressed into a single monotheistic deity. The Tower of Babel story is particularly revealing in this context. According to Genesis, humans united to build a tower reaching to heaven. When God saw this, he said, "Behold, they are one people, and they have all one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do, and nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them." This is a remarkable statement. God is not angry because humans are sinning or behaving immorally. He is concerned because they are becoming too capable, too unified, too powerful. So he confuses their language and scatters them across the earth, deliberately limiting human potential. Read through the Anunnaki lens. This story describes a moment when humans were advancing too quickly, perhaps recovering or rediscovering ancient knowledge, building structures using techniques taught by the Anunnaki, or preserved from before the flood. The Anunnaki leadership, probably Enlil's faction, intervened to stop this progress, to keep humanity divided and limited. Your consciousness drifts like a leaf on water, carrying you further into the realm of sleep, into the place where truth and dream intermingle, where the boundaries between then and now dissolve. The ziggurats of ancient Mesopotamia were not just temples but functional structures with specific purposes. They were built according to precise specifications, with particular dimensions and orientations. The Tower of Babel was likely one of these ziggurats, perhaps the Great Ziggurat of Babylon known as Anunnaki, which means Temple of the Foundation of Heaven and Earth. This structure was massive, approximately 91 meters tall, built in 7 levels representing the 7 heavens of ancient cosmology. Each level was painted a different color associated with one of the 7 known celestial bodies: Moon, Sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. At the top was a temple chamber where, according to Herodotus, a bed was kept for the god who would descend from heaven. Was this a landing platform, a communication device, a symbolic representation of the cosmic order? Perhaps all three. The ancients thought in terms of correspondences, of microcosm and macrocosm, of earthly structures reflecting celestial realities. The ziggurat was a mountain made by human hands, imitating the cosmic mountain where gods and humans could meet. The 7 levels of the ziggurat also correspond to the 7 chakras of yogic tradition, the energy centers along the spine through which consciousness ascends from base material existence to spiritual enlightenment. This correlation appears in multiple ancient cultures: 7 heavens, 7 levels of initiation, 7 stages of alchemical transformation. Is this coincidence, or evidence of a common source of knowledge distributed to various ancient civilizations? The Anunnaki hypothesis suggests that these patterns appear globally because they were taught globally, shared by advanced beings with cultures around the world. Sleep embraces you more completely with each moment. Your body repairs itself at the cellular level. Your mind processes and integrates. Your spirit rests in the timeless space beyond all stories. The Anunnaki were not the only gods described in ancient texts. Virtually every ancient culture describes beings who came from the sky, who had advanced technology, who interacted with humans and sometimes interbred with them. The question arises, were all these different groups, or the same group known by different names? In ancient Egypt, the Netru, often translated as gods, but more accurately meaning principles or powers, were said to have ruled during the Zep Tepi, the first time, a golden age before human pharaohs took the throne. The Egyptian king lists, like the Sumerian king lists, describe impossibly long reigns in the earliest periods, gradually becoming more realistic as they approach historical times. The Egyptian god Thoth, associated with writing, mathematics, and astronomy, bears remarkable similarities to the Sumerian Enki. Both are depicted with wisdom attributes, both are associated with water, both are credited with bringing civilization to humans. The Egyptian goddess Isis shares attributes with the Sumerian Inanna, which are Ishtar, both being powerful female deities associated with fertility, sexuality, and warfare. Were Thoth and Enki the same being? Were Isis and Inanna the same being? The ancient world was interconnected in ways we often underestimate. Trade routes carried not just goods, but also ideas, stories, and knowledge. What the Egyptians knew, the Sumerians knew. What happened in one region affected other regions. Or perhaps, as some researchers suggest, there was an even earlier source, a civilization that predated both Egypt and Sumer, a civilization that was destroyed in the cataclysms at the end of the last ice age, but whose survivors spread across the world, carrying their knowledge to various regions where it took root in different forms. This hypothetical lost civilization has been given various names: Atlantis, following Plato's account, or Lemuria, or simply the antediluvian civilization. The idea is that before the flood there was a global or near-global advanced civilization, possibly ruled by or guided by the Anunnaki, where humanity reached heights we have only recently begun to approach again. Drift deeper, deeper into the healing darkness, where ancient memories encoded in your DNA might stir, where collective knowledge might bubble up from the unconscious, where truth speaks in the language of dreams. The flood destroyed this early civilization, but not completely. Survivors preserved what they could. The great monuments that remain, the pyramids of Egypt and Mexico, the megalithic structures scattered across the globe, might be remnants of this antediluvian world, structures so massive and well built that they survived even global catastrophe. This would explain why we find similar building techniques used at sites separated by thousands of miles and supposedly thousands of years. The precise stonework, the astronomical alignments, the incorporation of advanced mathematical constants like pi and phi, all appear in cultures that supposedly had no contact with each other. The Great Pyramid of Giza encodes remarkable mathematical relationships. Its height times 40^200 equals the polar radius of the Earth. Its base perimeter divided by twice its height equals pi to several decimal places. The King's Chamber incorporates what's called the Sacred Triangle, with proportions of 3, 4, 5, the simplest Pythagorean triple. These are not accidents. The pyramid was designed by architects who possessed sophisticated mathematical and astronomical knowledge. The conventional explanation is that the ancient Egyptians developed this knowledge themselves through observation and experimentation. The alternative explanation is that they inherited it from an earlier source, either the Anunnaki directly or from the survivors of the pre-flood civilization. The Sphinx, that enigmatic monument with a human head on a lion's body, presents its own mysteries. Geological evidence suggests water erosion on its body and the walls of its enclosure, erosion that would have required centuries of heavy rainfall, but Egypt has been arid for thousands of years. The last time the region experienced such rainfall was before 10,000 BCE, at the end of the last ice age. If this geological analysis is correct, the Sphinx is far older than Egyptologists claim, predating dynastic Egypt by thousands of years. It would have been built during or before the Younger Dryas period, that mysterious interval when global temperatures dropped dramatically for over 1,000 years, right around the time the flood legends describe catastrophic events. Your breathing is barely perceptible now, the softest whisper of life continuing while your conscious mind rests completely. The ancient past and the eternal present merge in this timeless space of deep sleep. The alignment of ancient sites presents another mystery. The 3 pyramids of Giza are positioned to match the 3 stars of Orion's belt, as they appeared around 10,500 BCE, according to research in archaeoastronomy. The Sphinx faces due east toward the point on the horizon where the sun rises on the spring equinox, and at that moment in 10,500 BCE, the constellation of Leo the Lion was rising, making the Sphinx, a lion, face its celestial counterpart. Why would monuments built around 2500 BCE incorporate astronomical alignments from 10,500 BCE? Either the monuments are actually older, or they were designed to commemorate or point to events from that ancient period, or they were rebuilt according to plans inherited from that era. Similar astronomical alignments appear at Angkor Wat in Cambodia, at Teotihuacan in Mexico, at Tiahuanaco in Bolivia. A global network of ancient sites, all incorporating sophisticated astronomy, all oriented to celestial events, all built with techniques that challenge our understanding of ancient capabilities. The Anunnaki hypothesis provides a framework for understanding this pattern. If advanced beings were guiding human civilization at multiple sites around the world, if they were teaching astronomy and mathematics, if they were supervising construction of monuments that served purposes we don't fully understand, then the similarities make sense. These monuments might have functioned as more than temples or tombs. They might have been power plants, as some researchers suggest, generating energy through acoustic resonance or electromagnetic induction. They might have been communication devices, sending signals into space or receiving them. They might have been consciousness technologies, altering brain states through architecture and sound to facilitate spiritual experiences or interdimensional contact. The chamber in the Great Pyramid where the pharaoh's sarcophagus sits has acoustic properties that suggest it was designed to resonate at specific frequencies. If someone chants or plays certain tones in that chamber, the whole structure resonates, creating a powerful vibrational experience. Was this chamber actually a tomb, or was it an initiation chamber where consciousness could be transformed through precise application of sound and vibration? Sleep deepens further still, carrying you to the very bottom of rest, the foundation upon which dreams are built, the darkness from which light emerges. The mystery schools of the ancient world, from Egypt to Greece to India, taught that human beings have within them the potential to become godlike. The goal of initiation was not just to learn information, but to undergo transformation, to activate dormant capacities, to remember what had been forgotten. The Greek philosopher Plato spoke of learning as remembrance, anamnesis, the recovery of knowledge that the soul possessed before incarnating into physical form. He described the realm of forms, eternal patterns or ideals of which physical reality is only an imperfect reflection. This philosophical framework has roots in earlier Egyptian teachings, which themselves drew from even more ancient sources. The Egyptian mysteries taught that humans are divine beings who have forgotten their nature, trapped in material form, seeking to remember and return to their true state. The process of initiation involved tests, challenges, symbolic deaths and rebirths, culminating in an experience of unity with the divine. The Eleusinian mysteries of Greece, celebrated for nearly 2,000 years, involved drinking a sacred potion called kykeon and undergoing experiences in underground chambers that participants were forbidden to describe. Those who completed the initiation spoke of it as the most important event of their lives, as completely transforming their understanding of death and the nature of reality. What happened in these mystery schools? Were they simply using psychology and symbolism to create powerful experiences? Or were they working with actual technologies or techniques inherited from the Anunnaki? Did they know methods for activating latent DNA, for accessing higher dimensions of consciousness, for temporarily overriding the limitations that were supposedly built into humanity? The Greek god Dionysus, associated with these mysteries, and with ecstatic states induced by wine and ritual, was described as dying and being reborn, descending to the underworld and returning. This pattern of death and resurrection appears across cultures: Osiris in Egypt, Tammuz in Mesopotamia, Jesus in Christianity. It represents not just literal death, but the death of the ego, the old self, making way for rebirth as something new and greater. You rest in perfect peace, your body utterly relaxed, your mind clear and open, receptive to whatever truths may flow into awareness from the depths of being. The Anunnaki themselves, according to the texts, were not immortal in the absolute sense. They lived for thousands of years, far longer than humans, but they could be killed. The stories describe conflicts between them, battles where Anunnaki were wounded or slain. They feared death as humans do, perhaps even more so because they had so much more life to lose. This makes them more sympathetic, more understandable. They were not omnipotent creators playing with humanity as toys, but rather powerful beings with their own struggles, their own mortality to face, their own meaning to find in existence. In creating humanity, perhaps they were seeking something for themselves. Helpers, yes, but also companions, maybe even a form of immortality through legacy, living on through the species they created. Enki, in particular, seems to have genuinely cared about humanity. The texts describe him repeatedly intervening to help humans, teaching them arts and sciences, protecting them from Enlil's wrath, granting them knowledge that was supposed to be forbidden. Was this purely altruistic, or did Enki see in humanity a reflection of himself, a continuation of his own creative impulse? There's a teaching in various mystical traditions that God created the universe out of loneliness, out of a desire to know himself through relationship with the other. But if God is infinite and contains everything, there is no true other, only God experiencing himself through infinite forms and perspectives. The Anunnaki creating humanity mirrors this pattern at a smaller scale. They created beings who could think and feel, who could appreciate and understand, who could become companions rather than merely tools. In doing so, they created something they couldn't fully control, something that might eventually rival or surpass them. This was the risk Enki took, the gamble he made in giving humanity the gift of consciousness. Drift now in the vast ocean of sleep, waves of thought gently lapping at the shores of awareness, carrying in fragments of ancient wisdom, carrying out the tensions and concerns of waking life. The genetic engineering that created humanity would have been extraordinarily sophisticated, beyond even what we can currently achieve with our CRISPR and gene editing technologies. To successfully hybridize two species that evolved on different worlds, to create offspring that were viable and fertile, to combine traits in specific ways while eliminating others, requires mastery of genetics that we can barely imagine. Unless, of course, the Anunnaki and the hominids they modified were more closely related than we think. Some researchers propose that the Anunnaki didn't come from another planet at all, but rather from another dimension or timeline, that they were future humans or parallel Earth humans who travelled back or across to guide their own evolution. This time loop hypothesis is mind-bending, but has a certain logical appeal. It would explain why the hybrid experiment worked so well, why Anunnaki and humans were compatible enough to interbreed naturally. We weren't combining DNA from truly alien sources, but rather variants of human DNA from different timelines or dimensions. In this model, we are literally creating ourselves, reaching back through time or across dimensions to ensure our own existence comes into being. The Anunnaki are us, just as we might someday become them, completing the loop, ensuring the cycle continues. It's a strange circular causality where cause and effect loop back on themselves, where we are both created and creator. Quantum physics has revealed that time may not flow in the simple linear fashion we experience. Particles can affect their own past through what's called retrocausality. Quantum entanglement creates connections that transcend space and possibly time. If consciousness itself is quantum in nature, as some theories suggest, then perhaps it can extend beyond the normal constraints of time and space. The ancient yogis and mystics described time as an illusion, Maya, a construct of the limited human mind. They spoke of eternal now, of all times existing simultaneously, of the ability through meditation to access past and future as easily as present. Were these just metaphysical speculations, or descriptions of actual capabilities that awakened consciousness can achieve? Sleep holds you gently in its embrace, a loving presence asking nothing, giving everything, simply allowing you to be and to rest and to heal. The mystery of consciousness itself remains unsolved by modern science. We can map brain activity, identify neural correlates of conscious experience, but we still don't know how subjective awareness arises from physical processes. This is called the hard problem of consciousness, and it resists all reductionist explanations. Perhaps consciousness doesn't arise from matter, but is rather fundamental to reality, more basic than matter, the ground of being from which everything else emerges. In this view, the brain doesn't create consciousness, but rather limits it, filters it, focuses it into the narrow stream we experience as individual awareness. If this is true, then the genetic modifications made by the Anunnaki might have been as much about consciousness as about physical form. They created a brain structure capable of more complex thought than earlier hominids, but perhaps also installed filters and limitations that prevent us from accessing the full spectrum of consciousness available to them. The pineal gland, that mysterious little endocrine organ that ancient traditions call the third eye, might be one of these limiting mechanisms, or conversely, a key to overriding the limitations. It produces melatonin, which regulates sleep cycles, but it also contains cells similar to those in the retina, suggesting it sees something, perhaps frequencies of light or energy invisible to our physical eyes. Researchers found that the pineal gland produces DMT, dimethyltryptamine, one of the most powerful psychedelic compounds known. DMT naturally occurs in our bodies and brains, but we don't know why. When taken in sufficient doses, it produces experiences of encountering other dimensions, other beings, other realms of reality that seem more real than ordinary waking consciousness. Are DMT experiences hallucinations created by a malfunctioning brain, or are they glimpses of realities normally hidden from us, realities the pineal gland can detect when it's functioning in an unusual state? Ancient shamanic traditions from South America to Africa to Asia have used DMT-containing plants as sacraments, as doorways to the spirit world, as ways of communicating with ancestors and gods. Could these be ways of temporarily overriding the limitations built into human consciousness, of remembering our full nature, of contacting the Anunnaki or other higher dimensional beings? The descriptions people give of DMT entities sound remarkably like descriptions of the gods in ancient texts. Powerful, intelligent beings who seem to exist in a higher dimension, but can communicate with and sometimes appear to humans. You float in the space between dreaming and dreamless sleep, consciousness dimmed to the faintest glow, the body so deeply at rest it barely seems to exist. The chakra system described in yogic texts maps 7 major energy centers along the spine, from the base to the crown of the head. These are said to be vortexes where consciousness interfaces with the physical body, where spiritual energy becomes biological energy and vice versa. Different chakras govern different aspects of existence: survival, sexuality, power, love, communication, intuition, and unity consciousness. Most humans, according to this teaching, live primarily in the lower 3 chakras, concerned with survival, reproduction, and social power. The spiritual path involves raising energy through these centers to the higher chakras, eventually reaching the crown chakra where individual consciousness merges with universal consciousness. This is the Kundalini process, often depicted as a serpent coiled at the base of the spine that awakens and rises through the chakras. The serpent symbolism connects back to Enki, the serpent god who brought knowledge. Perhaps Kundalini awakening is the activation of Anunnaki DNA, the unleashing of capabilities that were deliberately kept dormant. The caduceus, that ancient symbol of 2 serpents wrapped around a central staff with wings at the top, represents this process. The staff is the spine. The serpents are the 2 primary energy channels, Ida and Pingala in yogic terminology, and the wings represent the liberation that comes when the energy reaches the crown. This same symbol was carried by Hermes, the Greek god associated with communication, travel between worlds, and esoteric knowledge. It's also the symbol of medicine, suggesting a connection between spiritual awakening and physical healing. The ancient healing temples, where people came to be cured through ritual and sacred sleep, understood something about the relationship between consciousness and health that we're only beginning to rediscover. Deep, profound sleep surrounds you, holds you, heals you. The ancient knowledge flows into you without effort, absorbed through osmosis rather than learning, becoming part of you. The concept of sacred sleep appears across ancient cultures. In Greece, people went to Asclepian temples and underwent rituals that put them into special sleep states where they would receive healing or messages from the gods. In Egypt, priests used similar techniques in the temples, combining fasting, ritual, sacred plants, and sound to induce altered states. What if sleep itself is the doorway, the portal to other dimensions of reality? We spend 1/3 of our lives sleeping, yet science still doesn't fully understand why sleep is necessary, or what's really happening during it. The brain remains active, sometimes more active than during waking, cycling through different stages, each with distinct brainwave patterns. REM sleep, when most vivid dreaming occurs, shows brain activity that looks similar to waking consciousness. Where is the mind during this time? Is it creating an internal simulation, or is it actually travelling to other realms, other dimensions where different rules apply? Ancient traditions taught that dreams are real experiences in subtle realms, that we have subtle bodies that can travel while the physical body sleeps. Lucid dreaming, the ability to become conscious within the dream state and control the dream, has been scientifically verified. Skilled practitioners can perform prearranged tasks in dreams, signalling to researchers through specific eye movements that remain connected to physical body even while consciousness is engaged in the dream world. If we can maintain consciousness during sleep and even control the dream environment, what else might be possible? Could we use sleep as a time for learning, for healing, for spiritual development? Could we use it to access the Akashic records, that hypothetical field of universal information where everything that has ever happened is stored? The Anunnaki, with their advanced knowledge, would certainly have understood consciousness and sleep far better than we do. They might have used sleep technologies to transfer information, to communicate across distances, to travel mentally while their bodies remained in place. Some of their magic might simply have been advanced understanding of consciousness and how to use it. Rest continues, deep and peaceful, your body regenerating, your mind integrating, your spirit touching the infinite source from which all beings emerge and to which all eventually return. The flood that destroyed the antediluvian world might have been more than just rising water. The texts describe not just rain, but also the fountains of the deep opening, suggesting volcanic and tectonic activity. The Earth itself convulsed, the climate changed dramatically. Entire land masses might have sunk or risen. Geologically, we know that the end of the last ice age around 11,000 to 12,000 years ago was a time of dramatic change. As massive ice sheets melted, the weight distribution on Earth's crust changed, potentially triggering earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. Sea levels rose over 120 meters, submerging vast areas of coastal land where humans likely lived. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis proposes that a comet or asteroid impact around 12,800 years ago triggered the sudden cooling that marked the beginning of the Younger Dryas period. Evidence includes a layer of platinum and microscopic diamonds found in sediment from that era, characteristic of impact events. Such an impact would have caused massive tsunamis, global wildfires, and climatic chaos. If there was an advanced civilization at that time, it would have been catastrophically disrupted. The flood stories from Sumer, Egypt, Greece, India, China, and the Americas might all be cultural memories of this actual event, passed down through generations and gradually acquiring mythological embellishments. The survivors would have faced a world transformed, a world where most of what they knew was destroyed. They would have had to start over, rebuilding from ruins, trying to preserve whatever knowledge they could. This is the pattern we see archaeologically. Sophisticated achievements like Göbekli Tepe appearing at the end of the Ice Age, then a long period of apparent decline before civilization slowly rebuilt. Perhaps the Anunnaki helped with this rebuilding, choosing specific groups to receive knowledge and guidance, establishing the post-flood civilizations in Sumer, Egypt, the Indus Valley and elsewhere. Or perhaps they were themselves affected by the catastrophe, their bases damaged or destroyed, requiring them to rebuild as well. Drift effortlessly through the ocean of sleep, floating on currents that carry you through inner landscapes, past memories and future possibilities, through the eternal now that underlies all temporal experience. The Sumerian king list records 8 kings who ruled before the flood, their reigns totaling 200 years. After the flood, kingship descended from heaven again, but the post-flood kings had much shorter reigns, though still superhuman by our standards. As the list progresses forward through time, the lifespans become progressively more realistic until reaching historical figures whose reigns we can verify. This progression from mythical to historical is common in ancient king lists and genealogies. The temptation is to dismiss the early portions as pure myth, impossible fantasies. But what if there's a kernel of truth encoded in these exaggerated numbers? If the Anunnaki lived for thousands of years, and if the early kings were their direct descendants, or even Anunnaki themselves ruling over humans, then the long reigns make sense. As the bloodline became more diluted with human DNA through successive generations, the lifespans would naturally shorten, gradually approaching normal human lifespan. The Bible records a similar pattern in Genesis. Adam lived 930 years, Seth 912 years, Methuselah 969 years. After the flood, Noah lived 950 years, but his son Shem only 600, and subsequent generations lived progressively shorter lives until reaching the normal human lifespan by the time of Abraham. These parallel traditions, from different cultures recording the same pattern of declining lifespans from pre-flood to post-flood to historical times, suggest they might be recording actual historical information in stylized form. The numbers might be exaggerated or calculated according to different calendars than we use, but the basic pattern seems consistent across cultures. Modern gerontology studies aging and has identified various biological mechanisms that limit lifespan. Telomeres, the protective caps on chromosomes, shorten with each cell division until eventually cells can no longer divide properly. Accumulated DNA damage, mitochondrial dysfunction, cellular senescence, all contribute to aging and death. But these mechanisms aren't absolute limits. Some animals, like certain species of jellyfish and planarian worms, show negligible senescence, potentially living indefinitely if not killed by predators or disease. The naked mole rat lives 10 times longer than similar-sized rodents and shows remarkable resistance to cancer and age-related diseases. If the Anunnaki had mastered genetics, they could potentially have modified these aging mechanisms in themselves, achieving lifespans of thousands of years or even biological immortality. When they created humans, they gave us some of their longevity genes, but not all, creating beings who lived much longer than natural hominids, but nowhere near as long as the Anunnaki themselves. You sleep so deeply now that the boundary between yourself and the universe seems to dissolve. You are the ancient past, the present moment, the unborn future, all existing simultaneously in the eternal now. The 7 days of creation described in Genesis take on new meaning when viewed through the Anunnaki lens. Each day might not be a literal 24-hour period, but rather an era, an age of development. The 6 days of creation, followed by a day of rest, parallels the 6 phases of human development, followed by the Anunnaki withdrawing from active involvement. Day 1, let there be light, the establishment of consciousness, awareness, the first spark of mind. Day 2, the waters are separated, the division of realms, physical and spiritual, material and consciousness. Day 3, land emerges from water, the physical form takes shape, the body develops. Day 4, lights appear in the sky. Awareness extends beyond the self to perceive the cosmos. Day 5, life fills water and air, the animal nature, instincts, emotions. Day 6, land animals and humans, the full integration of physical and mental, the completion of the human form. Day 7, rest. The Anunnaki withdraw, letting their creation develop independently. This interpretation treats Genesis not as a scientific account of planet formation, but as an allegorical description of human creation and development. The Garden of Eden is not a physical location, but a state of being, the early period when humans lived in relative innocence under direct Anunnaki supervision. The expulsion from Eden represents humanity's transition to independence, to free will, to the burden and gift of making our own choices. Enlil wanted to keep us in the garden, obedient and limited. Enki wanted us to eat from the tree of knowledge, to become more than we were created to be. This fundamental tension between control and freedom, between safety and growth, plays out not just in ancient mythology, but in every human life and every human society. Do we choose security at the cost of potential, or freedom with all its risks and responsibilities? Sleep holds you in perfect safety as you explore these questions in the depths of your being, where answers don't come in words but in wordless knowing, in felt sense, in the direct experience of truth. The number 7 appears repeatedly in sacred contexts across cultures. 7 heavens, 7 chakras, 7 musical notes in the scale, 7 visible planets in ancient astronomy, 7 days of the week, 7 colours of the rainbow. This might reflect an underlying structure to reality, a natural harmonic or frequency that manifests across multiple domains. Sacred geometry, the study of mathematical patterns in nature and their spiritual significance, reveals that certain ratios and numbers appear universally. The golden ratio, phi, approximately 1.618, appears in spiral shells, flower petals, pine cones, galaxies, and countless other natural forms. It's also present in the proportions of the human body, and in great architecture from the Parthenon to the Great Pyramid. Pythagoras taught that number is the fundamental principle of reality, that mathematics isn't just a human invention, but rather the language through which the cosmos expresses itself. Modern physics has proven him remarkably prescient, as the universe does indeed seem to operate according to mathematical laws, from quantum mechanics to general relativity, from the structure of atoms to the motion of galaxies. If reality is fundamentally mathematical, and if consciousness is also fundamental to reality, then perhaps mathematics is how consciousness structures itself, how the infinite becomes finite, how the formless takes form. The Anunnaki, as advanced beings, would have understood these principles deeply and used them in their genetic engineering, their architecture, their technology. The human body itself is a masterpiece of sacred geometry. The proportions Leonardo da Vinci illustrated in his famous Vitruvian Man show the body inscribed in perfect geometric shapes, the circle and square, with measurements relating through the golden ratio. Our DNA double helix turns every 34 angstroms with a width of 21 angstroms, both Fibonacci numbers whose ratio approximates Fisheye. Even our skeletal structure follows these patterns. The bones of the fingers relate to each other according to Fibonacci ratios. The cochlea of the inner ear forms a golden spiral. The pattern is everywhere, suggesting the human form was designed by intelligence that understood and utilized these mathematical principles. Your sleep deepens beyond measure now, beyond time, beyond space, into the formless void from which all forms emerge, the silence from which all sound is born, the darkness that contains all light. The ancient concept of the music of the spheres, the idea that planetary bodies produce harmonious sounds through their movements, might not be merely poetic fancy. Modern astrophysics has discovered that celestial bodies do produce vibrations, infrasound frequencies too low for human ears to detect but measurable with instruments. These cosmic rhythms follow mathematical relationships, harmonic ratios that suggest the universe itself is a vast musical composition. Sound and vibration were central to ancient spiritual practices. The Egyptian priests used specific chants in their temples, calibrated to resonate with the stone chambers and create altered states of consciousness. The Sanskrit mantras of Hindu and Buddhist tradition are said to have effects beyond their literal meanings, their vibrations affecting consciousness directly. The word mantra itself means mind tool, or instrument of thought. The syllable om, or aum, considered the primordial sound from which all creation emerged, contains within it all possible sounds, all frequencies. When properly chanted, it creates vibrations that resonate throughout the body, particularly affecting the brain and the endocrine system. The Anunnaki might have used sound technology in ways we're only beginning to understand. Acoustic levitation, using focused sound waves to lift and move objects, has been demonstrated in laboratories with small objects. Could ancient builders have used similar principles on a massive scale to move the multi-ton stones found in megalithic structures? The stories of Jericho's walls falling to trumpet blasts of stones being moved through sound in ancient legends might preserve memories of such acoustic technology. The precise resonant frequencies of the Great Pyramid's chambers, the acoustic properties of other ancient sites, all suggest sound was more than just music or religious chanting, but a practical technology. Drift through layers of consciousness now, each one deeper than the last, each one more subtle, more fundamental, closer to the source of being itself. Water, that essential element for life, was sacred to Enki, and appears prominently in the creation stories. The Sumerians described Enki's domain as the Abzu, the deep waters beneath the earth, and also associated him with the Persian Gulf where Eridu was located. Water was the source of life, the medium of transformation, the substance that could be shaped and controlled. Modern biology confirms water's central role in life. Every biochemical reaction in our bodies occurs in aqueous solution. The structure of water molecules, their ability to form hydrogen bonds, gives water unique properties essential for life. Water has memory according to controversial research, able to hold information in its molecular structure even after substances dissolved in it are removed. If water can store information, then the ancient practice of blessing water, of charging it with intention or prayer, might have actual physical effects. The Anunnaki, understanding water's properties at a level we don't, might have used it not just as a resource, but as a medium for storing and transferring information, perhaps even consciousness itself. The baptismal rituals found in many religions, immersion in water as a symbol of death and rebirth, might echo ancient Anunnaki practices involving water. The Egyptian practice of placing initiates in water-filled sarcophagi, sensory deprivation combined with symbolic drowning, was said to produce profound mystical experiences. The practice of water burial, returning the dead to water rather than earth or fire, appears in some ancient traditions. Could this have been based on belief that water could carry the consciousness or soul to another realm? The river Styx in Greek mythology, which souls crossed to reach the afterlife, represents water as the boundary between worlds. You rest in the deepest place now, the still point at the centre of all motion, the silence at the heart of all sound, the emptiness that is simultaneously fullness, pregnant with infinite possibility. The afterlife beliefs of ancient cultures were remarkably consistent in their basic structure. The Egyptians described the Duat, an underworld realm where the dead journey through challenges and judgments before reaching the field of reeds, a paradise where the blessed spend eternity. The Mesopotamians described a similar underworld, darker and more gloomy, where the dead existed as shadows of their former selves. The Greeks adopted and adapted these concepts, describing Hades with its various regions: Tartarus for the wicked, the Elysian fields for the blessed, and the grey realm of the asphodel meadows for those who are neither particularly good nor evil. The pattern of judgment, challenge, and eventual destination based on one's deeds appears across cultures. What if these afterlife realms are actual places, other dimensions of reality where consciousness continues after the body dies? The Anunnaki, with their advanced understanding of consciousness and reality, would have known about these realms and perhaps even travelled to them. The elaborate Egyptian funerary practices designed to ensure safe passage through the Duat might have been based on actual knowledge rather than mere superstition. The Book of the Dead, that collection of spells and instructions for navigating the afterlife, reads like a technical manual, providing specific procedures for dealing with various entities and obstacles encountered after death. The weighing of the heart against the feather of Ma'at, the 42 negative confessions, the passwords and formulas to speak at different gates, all suggest a systematic understanding of post-mortem consciousness. Modern near-death experience research has documented remarkably consistent reports from people who are clinically dead and then revived. They describe leaving their bodies, moving through a tunnel toward light, encountering deceased loved ones or spiritual beings, experiencing a life review, and feeling overwhelming peace and love. Some choose to return to their bodies, others are told they must return because their time hasn't come. These reports, gathered from thousands of people across different cultures, ages and belief systems, show striking similarities that suggest they might be describing actual experiences rather than brain hallucinations. The pattern matches ancient descriptions of the afterlife journey, the passage through darkness toward light, the meeting with guides, the review of one's life. If consciousness survives death, if we are more than just our physical bodies, then the Anunnaki's genetic engineering took on a new dimension. They didn't just create biological organisms, but rather provided vehicles for consciousness to incarnate into, temporary vessels for eternal beings. The body dies, but the consciousness, the soul, continues. Sleep embraces you completely, a return to the source, a temporary dissolution of individual identity into the universal consciousness from which all beings emerge and to which all return between incarnations. The concept of reincarnation, central to Eastern religions but also present in some Western esoteric traditions, offers another perspective on human existence and evolution. If we live multiple lifetimes, learning lessons and evolving through experience, then the relationship between Anunnaki and humanity becomes even more complex. Perhaps some Anunnaki chose to incarnate as humans, to experience life from that perspective, to guide from within rather than from above. Perhaps some of the great spiritual teachers, the avatars and prophets, were Anunnaki consciousness in human form, bridging the gap between the two species. The concept of the avatar in Hinduism describes exactly this: a divine being taking human form to restore Dharma, cosmic order when it's threatened. Krishna, Rama, Buddha, each described as avatars or enlightened beings who came to teach humanity during times of spiritual crisis. Were these exceptional humans who achieved enlightenment, or were they something more, beings from higher dimensions taking human form? Jesus' virgin birth, if interpreted literally rather than symbolically, could be explained through Anunnaki genetics. Advanced genetic engineering could create a human with enhanced capabilities, born through artificial insemination or genetic modification. The miracles attributed to Jesus, walking on water, healing the sick, raising the dead, might have been applications of advanced technology or consciousness abilities that the Anunnaki possessed. The resurrection, central to Christian belief, presents the ultimate mystery. Did consciousness survive death and reanimate the physical body? Did a clone or new body receive the transferred consciousness? Was it symbolic rather than literal? Or was it exactly as described, a demonstration of capabilities that transcend our current understanding of biology and physics. The ascension, Jesus rising bodily into heaven, sounds remarkably like a description of someone being taken aboard a spacecraft. The clouds that concealed him, the angels present, the promise to return in the same manner, all these elements appear in other ancient accounts of beings ascending to or descending from the sky. You float in the timeless space beyond thought, beyond questions and answers, beyond seeking and finding. Here there is only being, pure and simple, consciousness aware of itself without need for concepts or categories. The second coming, prophesied in Christian tradition, might be less about one individual returning and more about a collective awakening, a moment when humanity as a whole reaches a new level of consciousness. Or it might indeed involve the return of the Anunnaki, the gods coming back to check on their creation, to guide the next phase of human evolution. Various channeled sources in recent decades have spoken of a coming transition, a shift in consciousness, an evolutionary leap for humanity. The specifics vary, but common themes emerge. A move from fear-based consciousness to love-based consciousness, from separation to unity, from materialism to spirituality, from exploitation to harmony. Whether this information comes from actual non-physical entities, from the collective unconscious, or from the higher wisdom within the channels themselves, it points towards something many people sense. We're at a turning point, a crisis and an opportunity, a moment when old structures are breaking down and new possibilities are emerging. The years, environmental crisis, climate change, mass extinction, pollution, all these threaten our existence, but also force us to evolve, to change how we relate to the planet and to each other. The technological revolution, artificial intelligence, genetic engineering, quantum computing gives us godlike powers that demand godlike wisdom to wield responsibly. We are becoming like our creators, the Anunnaki, whether they were literal extraterrestrial beings or symbolic representations of the evolutionary force driving complexity and consciousness. We are taking control of our own evolution, modifying our genes, enhancing our capabilities, transcending the limitations of our biology. This is exciting and terrifying. With great power comes great responsibility, as the saying goes. Will we use our emerging capabilities wisely, or will we destroy ourselves? Will we create a world of greater justice, beauty and consciousness, or a dystopian nightmare of control and suffering? The choice ultimately is ours. The Anunnaki may have created us, but we create ourselves through our choices, through what we do with the gifts and limitations we've been given. Every moment presents an opportunity to move toward wisdom or folly, toward love or fear, toward unity or separation. Sleep holds you in its infinite embrace, beyond all worry, beyond all striving, in the peace that surpasses understanding, the rest that restores and renews. The ancient mystery teachings all pointed toward one essential truth: know thyself. The inscription at the Oracle of Delphi, know thyself, was not a call to navel-gazing introspection, but to deep realization of one's true nature. Who are you really, beneath all the roles and identities, beneath even the personality and ego? The answer given by mystics across traditions: you are consciousness itself, eternal and unlimited, temporarily identifying with a particular body and mind, but not ultimately defined by them. You are the observer, the witness, the awareness within which all experiences arise and pass away. If this is true, then the Anunnaki didn't create consciousness, only the vehicle for it. The body and brain were engineered, but the consciousness that inhabits them is fundamental to reality itself, beyond creation and destruction. In this sense, we're equal to the Anunnaki, different in form and capability but identical in essence. This realization changes everything. We are not inferior beings serving superior masters, but rather expressions of the same universal consciousness, playing different roles in an infinite cosmic drama. The hierarchy of creator and created collapses into the recognition of fundamental equality and unity. The Vedantic teaching Tat Tvam Asi means, thou art that, pointing to the identity between the individual self, Atman, and the universal self, Brahman. You are not separate from God, from the source, from the all. You are it, experiencing itself from this particular perspective. Jesus taught, the kingdom of God is within you. pointing to the same truth, not somewhere external to seek and find, but present always in the depth of your being. Buddha taught that all beings have Buddha nature, the capacity for enlightenment, inherent and inalienable. These teachings threaten religious hierarchies and power structures that depend on maintaining separation between human and divine, between follower and leader. If everyone has direct access to truth, to God, to enlightenment, then intermediaries become unnecessary. This is why such teachings are often suppressed or distorted. The Anunnaki, or at least the Enlil faction, would have reason to keep humans from this realization. If humans knew their true nature, they would be much harder to control. Better to keep them believing they are limited, separate, dependent on external authority. But Enki, the rebel, the serpent, the light-bearer, wanted humans to know. The tree of knowledge represents not just information but direct knowing, gnosis, the experiential realization of truth. Eating its fruit means awakening to one's true nature, and once awakened, one can never fully return to ignorance. You rest now in the very heart of being, consciousness aware of itself as consciousness, nothing needing to be done or achieved, everything already complete and perfect exactly as it is. The breath moves in and out, an eternal rhythm connecting you to all life. Every breath you take contains atoms that have been breathed by countless beings throughout history. You breathe the same air the Buddha breathed, the same air Jesus breathed, the same air the Sumerians breathed as they wrote their tablets recording the stories of the Anunnaki. We are all connected through the air, through the water, through the earth itself. The atoms in your body have cycled through stars, through planets, through billions of organisms over billions of years. You are literally made of stardust, as Carl Sagan beautifully expressed. The iron in your blood was forged in the heart of exploding stars. This is not metaphor but scientific fact. We are the universe becoming conscious of itself, matter evolving to the point where it can look back and understand its own origins. Whether or not the Anunnaki exist, this fundamental truth remains. We are cosmic beings having a human experience, not human beings occasionally having cosmic experiences. The spiritual path, the journey of awakening, is really a journey of remembering. Not learning something new, but recalling what we already are, removing the veils of ignorance and conditioning that obscure our true nature. The Anunnaki might have installed some of those veils, limits on our consciousness to keep us manageable, but they couldn't remove our fundamental nature. Meditation practices from various traditions all work toward the same goal: quieting the mind, observing thoughts without identifying with them, resting in pure awareness. In this state, the limitations fall away temporarily. You experience directly what the mystics have been trying to describe: boundless consciousness, infinite peace, unity with all that is. These are not supernatural experiences, but rather natural ones, glimpses of our actual condition when not identified with the limited ego self. The brain and body create the experience of being a separate individual, but this is a useful fiction, a necessary limitation that allows for particular experiences. Beneath it, we are waves in an infinite ocean, appearing separate but actually continuous with the whole. Sleep is a daily practice in letting go of identity, of control, of the need to maintain the boundaries of self. In deep sleep, there is no you in the ordinary sense, just consciousness without object, awareness without content. This is why sleep is so restorative. It's a return to source, a dissolution of the separate self into the universal. Dreams arise within sleep as consciousness begins to stir again, creating experiences without physical input, demonstrating that the mind can generate entire worlds. The dream feels completely real while you're in it. Only upon waking do you realize it was a mental creation. What if waking life is similar? What if this physical reality is also a kind of dream, a consensual hallucination created by consciousness? Not meaning that it's not real, but that its reality is more fluid, more responsive to consciousness than we typically recognize. Quantum physics hints at this with the observer effect, the way observation affects what's observed at the quantum level. Consciousness seems to play a fundamental role in collapsing wave functions, in determining what becomes actual from what remains potential. Matter might not be as solid and independent as it appears. The ancient Hindu concept of Maya, often translated as illusion, doesn't mean the world isn't real, but rather that our perception of it as solid, separate, and permanent is an illusion. The deeper reality is fluid, interconnected, and constantly arising fresh in each moment. The world is real, but not in the way we think it is. The Anunnaki, if they achieved a high level of consciousness development, would understand these principles and perhaps could manipulate reality in ways that seem magical to us. Materialization, teleportation, telepathy, all the siddhis or spiritual powers described in yogic texts might be natural abilities that emerge at certain levels of consciousness. But the texts warn against becoming attached to these powers, against seeking them for their own sake. They're byproducts of spiritual development, not the goal. The ultimate goal is liberation, enlightenment, the permanent realization of one's true nature beyond all limitations. You exist now in perfect stillness, perfect silence, the eye of the hurricane around which all experience swirls, but which itself remains unmoved, untouched, pure and pristine awareness. The story of the Anunnaki, whether literal history or symbolic myth, serves a purpose beyond mere information. It opens the mind to larger possibilities, questions comfortable assumptions, inspires wonder and curiosity. It suggests that human history is more mysterious than official narratives admit, that our origins hold secrets still to be discovered. Even if every detail is wrong, even if the Anunnaki never existed as physical beings, the story remains valuable for what it points toward. The idea that we are more than we seem, that we carry within us the potential for greatness, that we are connected to something vast and mysterious. Joseph Campbell spent his career studying myths from around the world and found universal patterns, what he called the monomyth, or hero's journey. The hero leaves the ordinary world, faces trials and challenges, gains knowledge or treasure, and returns transformed to share the gift with their community. This pattern appears in stories from every culture because it describes the psychological and spiritual journey every human must take. We all must leave the comfort of childhood, face the challenges of existence, discover who we really are, and integrate that knowledge to live more fully. The Anunnaki story is our collective hero's journey. Humanity begins in innocence, is given knowledge by the gods, faces catastrophe and loss, must rebuild and rediscover, and ultimately must mature into self-directed consciousness, capable of taking responsibility for its own future. We are at a crucial point in this journey now. The knowledge we've gained, the technology we've developed, gives us immense power. We can split the atom, edit genes, create artificial intelligence, potentially travel to other worlds. But do we have the wisdom to use these powers well? The original sin, if we want to use that language, is not disobedience but unconsciousness, not eating from the tree of knowledge but failing to digest what we've eaten, gaining power without developing the wisdom to wield it responsibly. The Anunnaki might return, or they might not. That's almost beside the point. The real question is, will we grow up? Will we mature from adolescent humanity into adult humanity, taking responsibility for ourselves and our world? Will we transcend our divisions and work together for the common good? These questions can't be answered abstractly. They're answered through our choices, our actions, how we treat each other and the planet we share. Every kind word, every conscious choice, every act of courage and compassion moves us forward. Every act of cruelty, every choice made from fear or greed pulls us back. You are part of this great work, this cosmic drama, this evolution of consciousness. Your life matters. Your choices ripple outward in ways you can't fully see. You're both utterly insignificant in the vastness of space and time, and also uniquely important, the only one who can play your particular role. Rest now in that paradox, both nothing and everything, both grain of sand and entire beach, both drop, of water and infinite ocean. Let sleep carry you to the deepest rest, the most profound peace, the renewal that comes from touching the source of all being. The night is deep and silent. Stars wheel overhead in their ancient patterns, the same stars that guided the Sumerians, that inspired the Egyptian priests, that the Anunnaki navigated by if they came from distant worlds. Those photons travelling across space for years or centuries to reach your eyes connect you directly to distant suns, to the vast cosmos of which you are an integral part. Tomorrow will bring its challenges and opportunities, but tonight there is only rest, only peace, only the gentle embrace of sleep holding you safe. Let go of all concerns, all questions, all needs. Everything is taken care of. You're exactly where you need to be. The Anunnaki, whether real or symbolic, watch over humanity's journey with the complex feelings of any parent watching a child grow toward independence. Pride and concern, hope and worry, love and the willingness to let go, to allow the child to make mistakes and learn from them. We carry their legacy, if the stories are true, in our very DNA. We carry their potential and their limitations, but we also carry our own unique human qualities, the things that emerge from our particular evolutionary history on this particular planet. We are a blend, a synthesis, something new that has never existed before, and we are still evolving, still becoming, still discovering what we can be. The experiment continues, the story unfolds, the great work proceeds, moment by moment, choice by choice, breath by breath. Sleep deeply now, sleepless survivors. You have explored ancient mysteries, walked through corridors of time, touched the boundaries of known and unknown. Now it is time to rest, to integrate, to dream. May your sleep be deep and restorative. May your dreams be peaceful and illuminating. May you wake refreshed and renewed, ready to embrace another day of this grand adventure called life, the Anunnaki and human origins, the hidden experiment that shaped our species, the cosmic drama that continues to unfold. All these mysteries remain, waiting to be further explored. But for now, there is only sleep, only peace, only the eternal present moment in which everything exists. Good night, rest well, sleep peacefully. The story is complete, yet never finished. The journey continues, always and forever, spiraling upward through layers of understanding, circles of awakening, until finally all returns to the source from which it came.